Rock and stone!
I'm the best Dark Souls player of all time. Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to another fantastic stream here at the Mountain Home. It is I, the man, the myth, the legend, the dwarf himself, Horatius. Welcome on into the Mountain Home. It is very much a pleasure to have you all here tonight. We, of course, have a very special stream laid out for today. This is going to be the third of the Psychology 101 lectures, the Parasocial Relationships topic. It'll have a lot to dig into, and I saw that we already got to follow Tereb Scali. Let me know how to pronounce that correctly. I'm very sorry if I said it wrong. But welcome to the Mountain Home, and now that you're following, you're no longer some random loiterer outside. Now, welcome guest in my minds. Eager for this one? Me too. But Sir Mince, Otis, Maple, Witchwatch Games, Quathalam, Tereb, yourself, thank you all so much for coming by. Welcome on in, everyone. I'm very excited for these streams. I always am. I think it's going to be a really, really awesome one. And I just realized that I still have Vampire Survivors on in the background. Let me turn that off. That was an accident. Let's see. So just setting up a couple of things before we get underway. But these streams have been super fun. Yeah, you said it right. So what's this stream about? Right, so Tereb, allow me to sort of give you the breakdown. So my name is Horatius the Dwarf. I'm a Dwarf Vtuber, as I'm sure you've noticed by this point. And generally, we do a lot of video games, we do collabs, we hang out with people. Excuse me. But recently, for the past 4 some months, I've been doing monthly streams where I do a psychology education stream because I'm a mental health professional by trade. So I like to bring my work into this streaming stuff. And over the course of the last year and a half that I've been streaming, I did a couple of sort of spontaneous education psychology streams where I would take a psychological topic and we would talk about it in depth for a couple of hours. And I really enjoyed those. And I decided in January in December with my anniversary stream that I was going to make these a recurring segment on a somewhat planned schedule. So every month in January, we've been doing these. We missed February, but that's fine. I'm not worried about it. We're moving forward. But what I don't know about parasocial relationships, I think this one's going to be really good. I pulled... So this one kind of failed me because parasocial relationships, while we'll learn more about it as we go, unlike the majority of these lectures where a lot of the proper reading that I've done on it is going to come from a couple of my college years textbooks and then updated with modern research. The bulk of this is from modern research. This topic was not displayed in my textbooks at all. Or if it is, it's mentioned in passing in contexts that I'm going to save for other lectures. So, I'm very excited about today. It's going to be awesome. These streams are always a ton of fun. We always learn a lot. And so we're just going to shoot the shit for a little while so people can sort of pile in. And, I like to start at a nice hard, on the hour deal, but I also like to give people a couple of minutes to come in because here's the thing, guys. For those of you who have been to these streams, you know the scoot, but for those of you who this is your first Psychology 101 stream, the big thing with these streams is that the moment when I start the lecture, we're in, and it's just gonna go. So I don't like to start a lecture and then have to break it up constantly with, when people say oh hey, I missed the beginning, what's going on? You know what I mean? So in the interest of the overall flow, we're going to just sort of hang out for a little while and wait for people to show up and give people a good 15-20 minutes to pile in. So we'll start the lecture in 15 minutes. How did just yeah, exactly. Just like college. Also, welcome, Fodia. How you doing? I now understand why you're the ambassador. Yep, that's me. Random question before we start. Where did you get your opening screen? I love it. The trailer? I got my opening trailer from a buddy of mine who edited it together. But if you mean the art at the beginning, that art was made by Party Demoness Minerva. I'll see if I can grab her link. And post her here. That art on the splash screen was made by her. Minerva is an excellent artist. I like her a lot. She's a wonderful person. Okay. All right. All right. So, right. So this morning's stream was actually a real blast. I appreciate everybody who showed up for that. That was a real hoot to hang out with a couple of people and just sort of jabber on and play video games and mainly Vampire Survivors and just kind of hang out. So shout outs to everyone who was there for that. Ooh. I mean, I stayed too long. Yeah, I'll allow it. I'll added filthy French as a permitted term to automod. That's a statement. No, No, you're fine, buddy. You can do what you can. You're here for the start. I'm loving that you're here. I will these streams don't tend to go on too long, so don't worry too much about that. And these like special streams, I always post these VODs on the YouTube channel. So if you go and you subscribe to the YouTube channel, which link for that is beneath the stream right now, or you can do !YouTube and get the link for the YouTube, and you can go and follow me on there, or subscribe to me on there, and I'll get the VOD posted for this in the next couple of days. We'll just edit. Well, I generally just load the raw VOD, because there's some fun stuff in the beginning. So are parasocial relationships a relatively recent phenomenon? I know stuff like Bjorkstalker have always been around, but parasocial relationships have been relatively ignored until recently. We'll learn a little bit about the history of parasocial relationships for quite a while. But rest assured that the short answer to your question is no. Parasocial relationships are not a relatively recent phenomenon. Now, again, we'll get into it more later, but they have become notably more prominent in the past 20 years, and some of those reasons are we'll get into. But rest assured, with time, we'll address all that. Let's see. All right, let's give it a couple more minutes. I've got some water in me. I've got a banana for a midstream snack if I need. Honestly, I'm surprised. For a lot of reasons. I'm actually really happy about tonight. Tonight's going to be excellent. Either of them more interested? Yeah. I found out some pretty cool shit. Not going to lie. I'm pretty stoked with the little bit of with the research that I did, I should say. We're actually going to pull up an article and talk about a particular article that's not the most recent study. It's from 2016, but it seemed to be the most credible study that I could find that was somewhat recent. I mean, 6 years is old, but not it's not invaluable with that age. You know what I mean? Like, if you go more than 10 years back, that's when you start to be like, it's not too old. Yeah. For trivia on why I said what I said on OG streams and linked members of his community, there's a German guy there, and we constantly shit on each other. It's hilarious and great. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you guys can have fun with that, honestly. Genuinely happy for you on that. All right, let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? All right. Welcome everybody to the stream. I'm going to go ahead and leave the lo-fi on in the background. If it becomes distracting, please let me know. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and get into it. PowerPoint Pog, yeah. This is even more powerful than PowerPoint. This is a Google Slides. The engine music felt Dwarf in it 100,000. Yeah, it was made by the same guy that edited the trailer together. He's awesome. Yo, Google Slides, yeah. All right, so you guys may have already noticed something that we'll get into in a little bit. Last call. Before we begin the stream, let me give you guys just 1 minute or two for us to hang out, and if there's any last second questions, can you guys actually give me a heads up on how the audio sounds? Are we getting a lot of like my mouth noises and shit, or like how does it sound? It's good? Okay. Sounds clean? Thank you. I appreciate that. Every streamer is often curious if they sound like shit or not. I'm on mobile, but you sound fine? Great. Good to know. All right, everyone. From this point forward, we are officially in the lecture segment of this stream. So, as we move on, understand that I will, for the most part, not be reading chat. We'll go into a little bit of that as we go when we discuss the rules for today's stream, because there are a couple of rules that we need to follow for you and for me. But understand that this is a lecture. I do encourage you guys to chat and talk amongst yourselves and like pose questions and engage with each other. I think it's very important for you guys to do that. But understand, if you need my attention, there's a etiquette, there's a plan for that, and I'll describe it in just a moment. But a few deep breaths. Get that blood nice and oxygenated. All right. So, welcome to Psychology 101, Lecture 3, Parasocial Relationships. I'm Horatius Silverstone. I will be your instructor today. We'll be discussing the nature, the intimacies, and the layers of parasocial relationships and a little bit of its history, too. So, here are the rules for today's lecture. If you would like to ask me a question that is relevant to the current topic or slide at hand, I request that you use the raised hand channel point redeem. It's only 200 channel points. It's very affordable. And if you can't afford it, tough tit, or have someone else do it for you. Because I cannot, if I sit here and try and attend to all of the questions that you guys have, it can throw off the flow of the lecture. I have a bit of a plan with how these lectures are structured, loosely. But it's important for me to go in order so I can continue my pace and my rhythm throughout the entirety of this, so there's no dead space or the whole thing falls apart. So, if you have a question during the stream, I ask you to please, or during the lecture I should say, I ask that you please use the raise hand channel point redeem. At the end of the lecture, there will be a Q&A section, in which point raising the hand will not be required. I'll basically tell you that it's open season at that point. But from this point on, if you have a question, please use the channel point redeem. That's what it's there for. It helps me. It helps you. Thank you. If you have questions that are not on topic, please save them. Maybe even type them. But save them for the end at the Q&A. The Q&A is where we can go into more in-depth stuff. It's where we can talk about tangentially related topics, like things related to parasocial relationships that you have questions about. But please, during the stream, when you use the raise hand redeem, I ask that the questions are on topic. I will be interacting with chat. You guys know me. I love to interact with chat. It's literally one of the things that I enjoy the most about being a streamer is talking with you guys. And we're actually going to talk about that behavior in a little while. It's a very important one. But I'll be interacting with you guys much less than normal, so I can focus on the lecture. I'm not ignoring you. If you come in and say hello, if you come in and use the hello redeem, and I don't say hello to you, it's not me saying fuck you. I don't care that you're here. I'm trying to focus on the stream. I've disabled almost all of the channel point redeems for this stream, like I normally do, just so you know. All right, so I think it's genuinely very important that I discuss a little bit about myself before we get into these topics. I think it's very important that you guys know a little bit of who I am, why I feel it's important to talk about this topic myself and not let other people do it who may be more qualified. My name is Horatius the Dwarf. You guys probably all know that. I'm an EN Vtuber, which, just to reiterate, the EN in EN Vtuber means that the primary language that I speak on my streams are English, and by trade, I'm a mental health professional. You might be wondering, Horatius, are you a psychologist? I actually answered this question today on the morning stream, and the answer is no, I'm not a psychologist. A psychologist is a very particular job title held by people who generally have a master's or a doctorate's degree in psychology specifically. So, while I am a degree-holding person, I am very unspecific with my degree because, frankly, it's not your fucking business. But understand that I am a mental health professional. I have over 5 years of field experience. I'm currently employed as a behavioral aid to children in an educational setting. I specifically work with a demographic of children that are for the most part autistic. Like, some of them are not autistic, but the majority of them are. I have worked in several other positions similar to that in the past. but 5 years, most of it is with working with young adults and children, and the majority of that 5 years is in an educational setting. Now, that just means at a school. I am not a teacher. I do not teach children necessarily. I have experience with ABA, addiction counseling, intensive in-home crisis management, conflict resolution, and cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm going to make this very clear. I say this every psychology education stream, and it's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of not. I do not find the cock and ball torture joke about CBT funny. It's boring. It's a tired joke, and I'll time you out. Because, like, I don't care, you know? Yeah, exactly. It's overdone. It's a boring joke. Some people think it's very funny, and I don't think that they're bad people for that. That's fine. Comedy is subjective, like all art. So rest assured, if I see you make a CBT joke in chat, I will in fact take a moment to fucking time you out. Because that shit just legitimately irks me. But anyway, I want to make this abundantly fucking clear. I am not a licensed mental health professional where you live, in your country or territory. I say this because you will hear, you could say, well, Horatius, if you're a licensed mental health professional in the part of the world in which you live in, clearly there's a chance that you could also be that in where I live. And that is correct. But I feel it is my ethical duty as a mental health professional to assume that I am not licensed to practice where you live, and therefore all of the things that I do today and all of the things that I say and the way I try and phrase the things that I do are specifically aimed with the guise of me not being licensed to perform mental health for you, at you, with you, where you live. It's just ethics. It's just me covering my ass. So no one take what you... Sorry, we should go to the next slide. So, disclaimer, I'll do this since it's related and I'm sort of going with a different flow. Take what you hear and read here and improvise it. While much of what I will be sharing is fact, it will be slathered in opinion and bias. This is to cover my ethics and to not do unjust harm to people in my efforts here. Because the purpose of these streams is a few-folded. One, to raise awareness of mental health in the streaming community, to educate people on the basics of psychology, and to entertain and share my personal experiences in the field of mental health. I hope that's fun, clear, and fair. So, let's get into it. What is a parasocial relationship? I think it's important with all of these streams. Hold on, let me move myself a little bit. There we go. I feel like some of my gesticulations are getting cut off by the edge of the screen. Oh, God. Whoops. There we go. Cool. All right. That's fine. So, let's talk about parasocial relationships, because I think that every good lecture should start with a definition so that we are all on the same page of what I'm talking about when I say the term parasocial relationships. And you guys can see in the slide here, I will do my best to be shortening parasocial relationships to PSR through the rest of this lecture. It's just for the sake of flow. If someone comes in and asks what PSR stands for, do me a favor and tell them that it's parasocial relationships. Okay, so what is a parasocial relationship? Let's talk about that. Parasocial relationships is a term coined by Horton and Wall in 1956 to refer to a connection between an audience and a broadcaster. Okay, so I use those terminologies very specifically because, as you'll see in the bottom right of the slide, there's this concept has shifted and changed over the years in many ways to many different levels. Parasocial relationships psychologically resemble those of face-to-face interaction, but they're more mediated and one-sided. Like the nature of our relationship that we're having right now, like it's like you guys and I are engaging with one another, and it feels intimate, even though it is, at the end of the day, there's a disconnect between you and I. We're not actually sitting in the same room talking face to face. That would be a regular social relationship. There's a disconnect between you and I. So let's talk about how this line has muddled over time and between different mediums. But first, let's identify the difference between a parasocial relationship and a parasocial interaction. Parasocial interactions are a single instance of a parasocial engagement. So, for example, you watch a single stream of a streamer. That's a parasocial interaction. You watch a TV show. That's a parasocial interaction. You listen to the radio on your drive to work or whatever. That's a parasocial interaction. It's you being engaged directly, or rather indirectly, by another person who is talking to you. In their act or in actuality, they are talking to you directly. Now, you will be an audience member or a live studio audience or literally whatever. Excuse me. So yeah, that's parasocial relationships and interactions. While the cause of every relationship is nearly always due to several interactions happening in like sequence, this is not required. I wanted to put this in there because it's a very easy assumption to make, I feel, to be like, oh, well, interactions are just pieces that make a relationship. And that is mostly true. But it is possible and somewhat documented for people to have a single parasocial interaction that immediately turns into a parasocial relationship. Where someone has a instant connection with someone on a parasocial level that doesn't require multiple engagements or interactions for it to become a parasocial relationship. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the lecture, but just understand that even though these two terms seem borderline interchangeable, there are slight nuances that make them incompatible in that regard. So, how has time changed? How has the time and medium changed of parasocial relationships? You can see I've listed crown, mail, radio, phone, TV, internet, streaming. So I'm going to go in pseudo-chronological order. Crown, what I mean by the crown is I mean like regents, kings, barons, queens, czars, like name a location in the world, name the person in power of whatever monarchy structure or oligarchy or whatever, any garchy, that is a parasocial relationship. You have a relationship with your ruler, your leader, that is parasocial. And I think that that's an underappreciated relationship. You ever see someone who like idolizes a king or a leader, a political leader? That's a parasocial relationship. And it's a parasocial relationship that stems from a crown. That stems from an authority distance. Because it's very common, especially back in the day, to be a commoner of a kingdom and stand in the courtyard of the castle and see the king on his balcony preach or deliver an inspiring speech to his people. Well, he's talking to the audience, they are talking to their people, but and even though you can see them, right? Because the technology to communicate over long distances hasn't been established yet in real time. But in that moment, you as a commoner feel a connection to your regent, and you think, oh, this person cares about me directly, me in particular. And they don't. They care about the common people, maybe. They care about you being a member of their society, probably. And they care about your taxes, assuredly. But there's weight, there's authority, there's a disconnect between that relationship that you as a commoner have with the king. Now, when we go into the age where mail and the printed word becomes a prevalent source of communication, this is the first big step that we have of changing how parasocial relationships can form. Now, we can establish a relationship with somebody without ever meeting them. Take the old concept of a pen pal. Now, granted, pen pals still exist in today's world, but pen pals are one of the earlier versions of having a relationship with somebody in a parasocial fashion without, generally speaking, an authority difference. So if you have some, young person who lives on the East Coast and they have a friendship with someone in, the West Coast of a country that might be hundreds of miles apart, they can still talk to each other relatively frequently and easily with mail and by being pen pals. And then someday they might meet, but there's a radical shift in their relationship that is founded on this lack of direct interaction. But male-based relationships like that are a little less insidious because they are intimate, right? They are intentional, and they're generally one-to-one. Whereas the future of these parasocial relationships become more vitriolic or potential to be vitriolic, and we'll discuss why. We come into the age of the radio, where people can broadcast to large swaths of individuals, just like the king in his balcony to his subjects could, but instead, anybody with the basic radio equipment and a radio tower to broadcast out of, or just the willingness to go to a studio who's renting time. Any of these people can establish themselves as a radio personality and as a broadcaster. And this causes a boom of opportunity for people to become radio personalities. I mean, not even one generation of humans ago, people had that as a relatively common profession where they were a radio host or a radio talk show host or a radio broadcaster. And while those professions still exist to this day, of course, they're nowhere near as prevalent as they used to be. The radio stations are more bountiful than ever, but they fall under more corporate umbrellas. And they're generally more of a attachment to a multimedia franchise rather than a sole radio production. So, in the age of the radio parasocial relationship, we see this new wave of opportunity to engage with people on a much larger scale for much lower cost in a parasocial manner. Now we get to the boom, the age of television. With the iteration of televisions being put out to almost every home in almost every country across the world, on every landmass at least, I should say, we see this boom of people who are, game show hosts, talk show hosts, people that are talking directly to you through a screen for the first time and are establishing rapport with you with absolutely no idea who they're talking to. For example, if you watch old TV, you'll see that these, hosts will stare directly at the camera, like I'm doing right now. They'll be talking directly to you. Thank you, viewer. Thank you, my audience members. Thank you for coming by. And you'll notice that there's a lot of very specific choices that they make in that process. They're holding your attention. They're mimicking a personal, one-to-one conversation in as many ways as possible. You can still see this in today's television media, where as often as they can, they will look at the camera, because at that point they're now talking to the audience directly. It's to maintain that relationship, to establish that norm that you as an audience member are engaged directly with the content. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I need to just take a stretch break. I've been prattling on pretty hardcore for 20 minutes. Okay. So, the last two mediums of this are the internet and streaming. The internet is basically TV, but now it's literally everywhere. It's on websites, it's in videos, It's on YouTube. It's wherever you can post media. It's constant, it's everywhere, and it's only getting more prevalent every single day. Streaming takes this to its natural conclusion. And I'm not going to say actual conclusion, but conclusion for now. It's what we know. Where individuals, like myself, are talking directly to you in real time and reacting to your engagements should you give me any. Granted, this stream's a really bad example of that because I'm ignoring my chat and giving this lecture, but the general norm in streaming is that I say hee hee ha ha, you type in chat, and I react to you directly, and we have this intimate relationship that is completely disconnected in every way imaginable. I have no idea what you look like, and in this particular situation with VTubing, you will have no idea what I look like. So, now that we have a bit of an understanding of the history and the maturation and how parasocial relationships have changed in how they form through the mediums for which they were used in, let's learn a little bit more about them, shall we? So why are we talking about PCR? The prevalence of PCRs is more common every year. I feel like that was pretty heavily laid out in when I discussed the history. Nearly every individual has one or more PSRs in their life, and how to navigate these increasingly common encounters is more valuable than ever. And I mean valuable not just in, like, health for you as an individual, and myself even, because make no mistake, I am no different than any of you all when it comes to the fact that every person that has an internet connection in their life easily has multiple parasocial relationships to them. I'm just like you in that regard. I have parasocial relationships. There are streamers that I engage with that have no idea who I am. Not at all. But also valuable in the money sense. I'm rubbing my fingers together, but the fucking tracker's not picking it up. I want to showcase this image here. The Levels of Parasocial Relationship by Giles and Maltby from 2006. It's a bit of a dated chart, and it's not the most accurate, but it does showcase a very simple premise. And I'm going to actually blow it up a little bit because you guys can't read it very well. Hopefully that helps. There is the 3 levels in this model. The entertainment social level, where the celebrity is a source of gossip and interaction. So like someone that you engage with very, very shallowly. Then there becomes the intense personal level, where you feel a connection and you have this intense compulsive feelings towards that person. And then there is the detrimental level, the borderline pathological relationship, where you have uncontrollable behaviors and fantasies. Now, this is a very fantastical model, and I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it does showcase one of the worries that I have with the prevalency of parasocial relationships, because it talks about the particularly dangerous conclusions that these parasocial relationships can have, that in how people idolize others. So please be careful with that. So I think that talking about PSRs are really, really important. As I said before, they're more common every day. Everyone has them, most likely, and plenty of people have a ton of them, right? So this is a topic that a lot of people are talking about, because I looked, right, at the academic studies that discussed parasocial relationships, and let me tell you something that I discovered, okay? The overwhelming majority of these happened in 3 different times. There was a glut of them in the mid-50s when, what were their names? Horton and Wall first coined the topic. Then there was a boom of them in about the late 70s, early 80s. Shocker what those were about. They were about TV stars and celebrities in Hollywood. And then the third boom of any discussion and any research about these was, you guessed it, the past 15 years, the past 10 years. Now, granted, I'm not trying to say that that's an overwhelmingly strong piece of evidence to support that. I think that really more correlates with the activity in the psychological world more than anything, and that there was a sort of progressive ramp up of psychological interest academically between that time and now. But I do think it's interesting how this topic in particular seems to have a couple of peaks of activity in 3 different specific time frames. Again, not drawing any immediate conclusions. I just think it's an interesting observation. But now is the most important time to talk about it, because we're seeing some very big danger happen with this. And the danger is idols and idolization. You can look to the Korean and the Japanese pop idol scene. I could literally have a whole lecture talking about idol scenes, and we're not. So we're just gonna dip our toes into this for a moment. Here's the thing: it's a really, really toxic place socially, where young people, almost always young people, are dolled up and, pushed up into the spotlight, and their audiences are told that they are to be idolized. They are specifically called idols. And while idolatry is not necessarily a bad thing to do, it's okay to appreciate something and to hold it up on a pedestal, respectively and responsibly. But it can get very dangerous when you take a person, right, and manifest them into a semi-fantastical version of themselves. You strip them of their identity and personhood, and you make them a thing to be desired. You make them a product. And when you dehumanize a person and you create a product, they become sought after. They become devalued as an individual. And that's when we see situations where violence and illegal activity happen to these people by fans or audience members who, by all means, think that they're doing the best thing that they could ever possibly do for their idol, and they treat them the worst that they possibly could with, violence, murder. Like, I'm not going to get into the harsh words that get used, but, if you Google search idol assault, you will find so many articles of events where people who are in idol groups are accosted to some degree or another by fans, by people who love them, who would want nothing more than to make them happy. But they get lost in this parasocial relationship where they forget that the person that they're interacting with is in fact a person. It's tragic, and that is why talking about parasocial relationships, understanding what they are, how to navigate them in a healthy manner, and how to disengage from them when necessary are, in my opinion, invaluable skills. Which is why I want to teach you guys about this today and have done so up to this point. Cressida Grimmy is a very recent example, or a recent example. So, this is a study that I wanted to pull up and talk about because it identifies a lot of the things very specifically. I've listed the 3 little bits here. 1, the title. Parasocial interaction and parasocial relationship, conceptual clarification, and a critical assessment of measures. Now, I'm going to try and read all of these things and then also help make them a little bit more digestible, because let me tell you something. I love psychology. I love research. I love having people take things seriously. But holy shit, is it hard to read this fucking stuff. Like, I know what all of these words mean, and they're a lot to get through. When I did my thesis, it was my least favorite thing was reading the fucking studies, because god damn it, none of these motherfuckers know how to write. Anyway, so by Dibble, Hartman, and Rosen. You guys can look up this article by this name here. Parasocial interaction and parasocial relationship, conceptual clarification, and a critical assessment of measures. If you Google search that, you will find the article. It is accessible to the public. I highly recommend giving it a read and a watch.
Rock and stone!
Thank you. A read. if you have the free time. You can learn a lot by just reading the abstract for many articles. I highly recommend doing that if you have some free time and you want to learn more about a topic. Real quick before I get into this, welcome Simply Sugar VT. I think you've just joined us, so you may have missed the rules. I'm not going to be engaging with chat too much because I'm mid-lecture, but if you want to use the raise hand, redeem and ask a question, I openly invite you to do so. Thank you for coming to the stream. Okay, so this title. Let's talk about what this title means a little bit. So this is an article or a study concerning parasocial interactions and relationships, and it is a establishment of how we think about measuring parasocial relationships. Because that's the tricky thing, I feel like, for a lot of people, and it's why I pulled this study up in specific, is I think all of us have somewhat of a relatively decent understanding of what a parasocial relationship is at this point, just because it's such like a commonplace term. We've all heard it. And some of us might understand it. But this is an assessment of how we measure how those relationships form. So I'll read the abstract. Parasocial interaction and parasocial relationship are often conflated conceptually and methodologically, leaving researchers unclear as to which concept is being tapped. This research clarifies these concepts and experimentally compares the most common measure of parasocial interaction, the Parasocial Interaction Scale, or the PSI scale, with a newer measure, the Experience of Parasocial Interaction Scale, or the EPSI scale. Participants, which was a group of 383 people, viewed a brief video recording of a woman who either bodily addressed the viewer or didn't, then completed a questionnaire. The EPSI scale was a better measure of parasocial interaction, understood as a within-viewing experience of mutual awareness, whereas the PSI scale measured short or long-term liking or something else. To avoid conceptual and empirical confusion, researchers must choose measures with greater care. So, in short, this study is basically saying, hey, the PSI scale is a bunch of bullshit and it's not very accurate. So we came up with a new scale that's a lot better. We should use that. And when we measure people's intensity and prevalency of parasocial relationships, we should use the EPSI scale because it's better and more accurate, and people should be more critical about what measures they use to measure these sorts of things, you piece of shit. Professionally spoken, of course. So, there's a couple of big things that we can take from this abstract that are very, very valuable. First things first, this study was done with a relatively small sample size of only 383 people. It is my largest criticism of this article. I think what we'll find is that this stuff is pretty good. Like what the scale is pretty solid. But a less than 500 is a pretty small sample size, in my opinion. Because there's a lot of variables that aren't being considered, and when you have a lot of variables in your study, it sort of invites the contrary perspective of that whatever your findings are, they're not going to be very globally conclusive. They might hold water and be permitted to allow you to make some declarative statements concerning the exact location in which the place was done, depending upon how you acquired your population for your study. But whenever you look at studies, it's very important to be critical of how it was conducted so you can take better care of what you're reading. So let's look at the EPSI scale, all right? So I don't actually have the video. That was not openly accessible to me. Otherwise, I would have loved to have shown you the video. But there was a couple of screen caps that I did see, and essentially the two versions of the video are a woman is looking directly at the camera, kind of like how I described earlier, and then the other one, she's like looking off to the side and like gesturing to an off-camera, off-angle person. And in both of those videos, as far as I understand, the video was not shown twice. Like, both videos weren't shown to each participant. One of the videos was shown to one of the groups of people, and the other video was shown to the other group of people. So this is the questionnaire. While watching the video clip, Amy, and then the choices are, was aware of me, knew I was there, knew I was aware of her, knew I paid attention to her, knew that I reacted to her, or reacted to what I said or did. Now, I want to walk through these because these are very, very important levels of intimacy. If Amy was aware of me, that just means that that this person knew I was around. Knew I was in their presence.
Rock and stone!
Knew I existed is the word I would use. Knew I was there means that they knew that I was present. Knew that I was aware of her means that they didn't just know that I was in the same coffee shop as them, but had made eye contact with me and knew that I was there in particular. Knew that I pay attention to her, which is more of like a, heard me say something and then we locked eyes for a moment. And we both know that we're both aware of each other's personhood and see each other. Knew that I reacted to her. So if you drop a coffee in a coffee shop and you look up and someone across the room is making direct eye contact with you and reacting to your actions, and then reacted to what I said or did. So these are very distinct breach points of awareness of another person. And you can see that these numbers on the right are, this is indirect. So this is like people who watched the video where Amy was not looking directly at them. And then the direct were people who watched the video where she was looking directly at the camera, therefore looking directly at you. And then these different ratios of numbers are the different percents of the answers that were given. And you'll notice that the direct are all higher. Almost universally, all of the numbers on the right are higher, especially in the yes. So that's interesting, right? That's an interesting observation that you can make. That it seems by Amy looking directly at the camera over the course of the video, all of these steps seem to be more prevalent across the board. It's very cool. The video clip showed me that what Amy is like. But this is, people agreeing. And you can see there is mild differences. The direct, there's a mild bump in that. While watching the video clip, I felt as if I were part of a group. Very similar, very similar. I like to compare my ideas with what Amy said in the video clip. They see there now. Here is again a slightly noticeable difference, about almost 0.2 difference between the direct and indirect. Amy made me feel comfortable as if was my friend, and this is where we see a 30-point difference in prevalency with the direct versus indirect, perspective. I see him as a natural, down-to-earth person. Again, only a minor shift there. I like hearing the voice of Amy in my home. Again, only a minor shift. Amy kept me company while the video clip was running. Notable shift. Nearly 0.4. Different result in that regard. In favor of the direct contact, or eye contact. I look forward to watching Amy in another video clip. It's about the same. If Amy would appear in another video clip, I would watch that clip. Again, we see a small difference. I sometimes make remarks to Amy during the video clip. Not really. No one really did, it seems. If there was a story about Amy in a newspaper or magazine, I would read it. That's a very weird question. I would miss Amy when she was on vacation. And you see these questions are getting more and more intimate as the questionnaire goes on. And we end with, I would like to meet Amy in person. And again, we can see somewhat of a shift there. I think Amy is like an old friend. Nearly a 0.3 difference. And then the last question is, I find Amy to be attractive. I find that very fascinating that there's not much of a difference there. But the reason why I wanted to point this out is it showcases that thing that I mentioned earlier, and that is when a broadcaster is making direct contact and looks like they're gesturing and talking directly to you, it feeds into this idea, this intimacy, and that is why I feel that it's so much more prevalent to have PSRs today. Because back in the Crown era, there was very little direct contact between the population, the audience, and the speaker. There was some, but, you know, it was very transparent that was a person speaking to a crowd because you were in that crowd personally. Then we have the radio and the mail era where there's like very little direct intimate connection and back and forth, and it's slower and lower intensity due to frequency. And then we get into the TV and internet and streaming era in particular, where we are becoming progressively more directly connected eye to eye with our audience members and the audience members to the broadcaster. And the prevalency and the frequency and the duration of these parasocial interactions is hitting a critical point where these small metric differences in this scale are becoming more and more intense. I think this is a very important study to understand how parasocial relationships are formed. For those reasons. So, I hear you cry. This is all really well and good, Horatius. I'm glad that we've learned a little bit about parasocial relationships today. But, man, what do I do about this shit, right? Let me tell you. It is important to remember when addressing your own parasocial relationships that you recognize as harmful that these relationships are just as real and the feelings are just as valid as traditional social relationships. I think this is something that gets really swept under the rug when it comes to PSRs. The feelings that you guys have as audience members to your parasocial relationships is emulating regular social interactivity, and therefore the relationships, the feelings, and the memories that our brains solidify are emulating those real social interactions. The brain does not have a separate file for parasocial and social relationships because the files look the same, because they're formed identically. Not identically. They're formed mostly the same. So, it's super important, guys, to remember that you need to treat your parasocial relationships the same way that you treat your more traditional social relationships. So, they have to be treated of the same level of intensity. So, here are some methods that I recommend for interacting with your parasocial relationships. Reverse conditioning, reflection on self-compassion, exploring alternative creative and social outlets, and distancing, assisted or unassisted. I'll walk through them. Let's talk about the nasty one first. Distancing, assisted or unassisted. This is a bit of a mockery or an alternative version of exposure therapy, except it's the inverse, where instead of progressively exposing yourself to more and more intense versions of the things that you are afraid of or want to become more comfortable with, you are instead engaging with something that you already care about and want to care about less in less intense ways and frequencies and durations. So, let's say you recognize that you have an unhealthy relationship with a streamer. Just go straight to the quick. What can you do about that? Well, through this idea of distancing, you can stop watching them every time they go live. You can watch them once a week. Then you can watch them for, once a month. And then you can only watch their streams when it's a special event. And then you can, just watch it every now and then. And then you can just stop. The assisted and unassisted aspect to this is, if you recognize that you are personally having trouble creating distance with a parasocial relationship, then you can say, hey, I need a friend, I need a partner to help me establish distancing, and they can hold you responsible to follow through on your behavior. And when that happens, the ability to overcome parasocial relationships that you otherwise weren't able to skyrockets in viability. There's a lot of other levels to that, and we'll talk about that when we get into addiction later this year. But I want to point this concept out now because it's very important. So let's talk about reverse conditioning. So reverse conditioning. Conditioning, which we'll talk about later in the year as well, is this premise where by doing something over and over and over again, you make it a desirable thing for you to do because you associate the memory with doing it and blah, blah, blah. It's very complicated. I'm not going to get too deep into it. But understand that reverse conditioning is the opposite of this. If you're familiar with Pavlov, that's what I'm talking about. So reverse conditioning is undoing your conditioning by trying to encourage the opposite interactions. So these can take some mildly poisonous methods, like if you have an obsession with a streamer, you can, intentionally sabotage that relationship by blocking them or muting them or unsubscribing from them, and just this is going to share a lot of similarities with distancing, which is why I'm talking about them back to back. But one of these is a progressive reduction in the behavior that you're already doing, and the other one in reverse conditioning is directly undoing doing similar to the opposite of what you already are doing. So, the opposite of watching a stream would be to turn your computer off and go outside, or go do something else, or calling a friend and doing something in person. I don't know. Reflection on self-compassion. Self-compassion is a really big aspect and really antithetical to parasocial relationships. I can't believe it, I'd list this, but just going out and engaging with your friends. Yeah, touch grass, essentially. I didn't want to say that, but, reflection on self-compassion. So, reflect on your own value and your own efficacy in the things that you do. Consider self-talk, which is a very powerful coping skill, and no one fucking does it. Or when they do it, they don't recognize that it's a coping skill at the very least. I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you find that you're losing yourself in a relationship that is parasocial in nature, take some time and think about you. Think about how you're awesome. Give yourself an ego boost. Make something that you're proud of. Go and do something that you love doing. Go do something for you so that you can remind yourself what self-love is and that you should spend more time with you rather than spending all of your time with others. Exploring alternative creative and social outlets. Calling your friends to go get parties set up or to go do stuff or go see a movie or to go spend time with your loved ones. That's social outlets. Instead of making hanging out with streamers your hobby, make making content your hobby. Looking at you, Vtubers. Make art your hobby. Make video games your hobby. Make something your hobby. Make that a creative outlet. Find something to spend your time doing, and you will find that your parasocial relationships will reduce in intensity. So these are the major things that I would recommend that you do if you know that you're struggling or if you know someone is struggling with parasocial relationships, is to help them create distance, help them undo their learned behaviors that make them engage, reflect on self-value and compassion, and explore alternative creative and social outlets. Next month, we'll be discussing fears, phobias, and understanding arousal. The rest of the year, here are the topics that I'll be discussing: post-traumatic stress disorder, surviving social media, memory, addiction, bias, learning, sleep, and more to come. But these are the plans for the first year. Thank you all very, very much for coming to this stream. I deeply appreciate you all spending your time here and learning. I've been looking at chat. You guys have been doing some awesome dialogues so far. And now we are officially in the Q&A section. I open you all to pose questions considering this topic and other related topics, or perhaps if you'd like some targeted advice, now's the time. I'm going to drink some... That was all. I thought it was going to last much longer. Valid. But my concern, Tarab, about these lectures, and if I had them go on for multiple hours, is one, I feel that... So first things first, I want to go back a little bit. The purpose of these goals here is to educate people on the basics of psychology. So this is me taking you to dip your toes into this topic. If you want to learn more, I've shown you how to do so. I highly recommend that you look into these studies and learn a little bit for yourself. I feel like hours are typically an hour. Yeah, they're an hour to an hour and a half. I think my my stress one was a little bit longer because stress is a little bit more of a broader topic. And like post-traumatic stress, I have a lot to say about that. That's probably going to be a 2-hour lecture. Memory was literally my thesis. I've got a lot to say. That'll be a 2-hour lecture. Talking about learning is also a very large, broad topic. Probably going to talk about that for a while. So some of these are going to be shorter. Some of these are going to be longer. Is this going to be on the test? Every day in life is a test, Fotia. So yes, it will. It will be on the test. And just make sure you catch it. Yeah, man. I studied it as my thesis project, so I'll probably pull up my old like 35, 40 page paper and fucking talk about what I have in there. He'd risk losing his audience. Well, not just that, Johnny, although that is definitely an important discussion point. Is the big thing about letting a lecture go on for too long. Thank you very much, Ringcloud. I appreciate the bits. And the sub. Thank you for the sub during the stream. So now that you have subbed, you're no longer just a welcome guest in the mine. You are now in employ of the Mountain Home. So grab a pickaxe and get back to work. Let me see. Is it a good idea to try and turn a PSR into an actual connection, or is that not always the case? That depends. So, for example, I have met some streamers, and I definitely had parasocial relationships with them, and then I became their peers, rather than just another, person on the internet. Like, for example, I had a parasocial relationship with Hemlock Stone, and then we had Thanksgiving together, It's... The streaming world is a very finicky one when it comes to that question, Van, but let me tell you this. If you feel like you're putting more effort into establishing a traditional social relationship with somebody than you would normally otherwise do, now it's become unhealthy and you should cut your losses and walk away. It was a damn fine Thanksgiving. The shepherd's pie I made was fucking badass. Is it convergent singularity for PSRs and SRs? Yeah, it is quite a bit. Longer lectures need interspread Q&As. ADHD can't hold Qs that long? Yeah. Lad, this was amazing. A very short thing that was super educational. And more importantly, you were entertaining and clear while explaining. If there's any teachers in my school that have been competent as you, I would have gotten much further, not considering other factors. I appreciate that, Tarab. I really do. That's a very kind thing for you to say. I don't discount it, but I am very touched. Thank you. Let's see. Speaking of, actually forgot, are you putting these anywhere or just leaving them as Twitch VODs? On my YouTube, there are links to the VODs for these. So this will be going live in the next couple of days. Oh. So do we have any other questions? We're in sort of open season, so just fire them away, guys, if you have anything that you want to ask or anything that you would like me to go back and clarify, or the laneways are yours. Ah, goodness me. The biggest thing I learned is that while I never really thought of this subject, I was already perfectly knowledgeable about it. I think I look forward to future streams. Nice. I'm trying to think of something, but I think you covered most of your bases. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. Not really. This is the sort of content I wish I was on Twitch more. Yeah, RuneCloud. I deeply, deeply agree with you. It's very much been my opinion for quite a while that that people having the willingness to take their professional knowledge and share it in a entertainment setting is an undervalued thing on Twitch and on streaming platforms in general. So yeah, I really, really do wish there was more content like this on Twitch, which is why I'm doing my part. I think there aren't any questions on this one because most of us are probably fairly experienced with this subject at the very least. This would be a massive hit to people who avoid the internet, though, I think. Potentially, yeah. Potentially. So we can either call it now, or do you guys want to just transition into some gameplay? Just fucking just do some videos, I don't know. I said do some videos. I meant play some video games, but my lips have been flapping constantly for a full hour, so I'm a little bit verbally exhausted, as I'm sure that's pretty clear. Oh, that's so funny. I have literally paid to attend lectures like this, so hell yeah. You can't racist need right? Oh, I'm fine. Don't do the video games. That's not don't do the video games. That's not Twitch friendly. That's funny. Okay. I can only think of one other guy who does things like this, and he talks with streamers about mental health stuff, although I can't think of his name. It's like Dr. something, and I would love to talk to him sometime. Let's have some whiplash. Okay. He's a dinos and cars guy. Thank you for the biddies, Moon Bitch. Dr. Mick makes incredible content. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm tempted to play some video games, but I don't know what I would stream. Four hours of driving tomorrow, then family dinner, and then driving home on Sunday. Is tomorrow Easter, or is Sunday Easter? I'm confused. I forget. Considering PSRs can sometimes be intentionally or unintentionally created by the same methods that streamers deliberately pursue as metrics, show they increased donations, is the development of PSRs in a community a shared responsibility between community and streamer? That's a fantastic question. Sign said 5 cents. Tomorrow is Sunday for you, so yes, Kappa. All right. I would say Grievous. My opinion on that question is one of the most venomous things about the online content creating field right now is that the personalities, the people behind it, are incentivized to manipulate their audiences. They are openly incentivized to manipulate people. And it's one of the reasons why I don't think I'm ever going to be a massive content creator. It's one of the reasons why I don't think I'm going to be able to give up my profession. Not that I would want to anyway. I think that it's genuinely one of the big sorrows that I have about being a content creator is that at the end of the day, a lot of people that do this for a living have to engage and are encouraged to engage in manipulative tactics to pull people in, to make them stay, to incentivize them to pay. And that's really quite troubling to me. It really honestly is. But I would say it is a shared responsibility of the community and the streamer. It's a responsibility of everybody, of every individual. The people here now, you guys are responsible for engaging in my content. You know? I wouldn't say everyone big, but yeah. You know, you guys watching this stream right now, you guys have an obligation to yourselves to create a respectful, healthy relationship with me. Because every relationship is 2 or more people. I've been saying this a lot recently. I'll say it again. Now, granted, because we're a relatively small channel, I can have a quite intimate relationship with pretty much all of you. I mean, I recognize all your usernames. Some of you I know quite well. Some of you I know personally. And we are on good terms, as far as I know. But people who have, hundreds or thousands of people in their stream every day, it can get really easy to get lost in the sauce. And you have to, as the individual, as the content creator, as the broadcaster, it is morally correct for you to protect yourself by distancing yourself from that massive population of people, because it can be socially draining, mentally exhausting, and physically drain you of your energy and your strength to maintain all of those things. It will tax you. So you have to take care of yourself as the individual, and then you have to take care of yourself as an audience member. Like Van earlier asked the question. I know what you were discussing this morning, Horatius. Well played, Johnny. The thing for the audience members is, like Van asked, like, is it worth it to pursue relationships with those people, And it can be. You can get a lot out of that. For the girlfriend experience, fuck you, moon bitch. I'm a Bara dad, I've been told. I don't know what that means, but it's fine. Absolutely. There's a certain Orcat who recently blew up. Watch her streams with this in mind, and you'll see exactly what he's talking about. Yeah. Yes, you are king. Hey, everybody. A rose by another name may still smell as sweet, but cast an illusion of difference. Ah, very wise words. I'm waiting for the $100 wedding ring merch. Oh my god. That's fine. God damn it. Runecloud, I love how I know exactly who you're talking about, although I cannot remember their name. According to Pork Buns, Bara was a very hairy and muscular man, I think. I might be misquoting. Cheers. Alright, let's find someone to raid. Oh, I know who to raid, if he's still alive. Yeah! So everyone, this is Cabal. Cabal's a fucking excellent dude.
And the pentagram did all the fucking work.
You can hear him now. He's fucking hilarious. This guy is a talented broadcaster. He knows his shit, and I legit really respect him. As a guy who has a much larger audience than me, he takes incredibly in-depth care to not establish unhealthy relationships with the people that watch him. So I highly recommend giving him a follow, giving him your time. He is a really good dude. He also likes to talk about a lot of very serious topics, so you can learn a lot by watching him. Enjoy. He gives a lot of great advice. Take care, everybody. Thank you for being here. As always, I'm Horatius the Dwarf. We'll be streaming a lot this next 8-10 days, so you all have a great one. And as always, it's time to get out of my mind. And Zero Skies has the raid message. Shit, I'm so bad at this. So post that. All right, it's time to get out of my mind. We do it again.